Well, welcome back to the Rainbow Studio. I'm your host, Craig Winn. This is your co-host, Wookie. Wookie wants you to know that he was there during the entire time that I wrote Twistianity and even Goddamn Religion. So he feels like, he has a contribution to make to these programs. What we were doing at the end of our last program yesterday on Appalling Twistianity was reviewing what had been scribed by Moshe in the Torah in the concluding book called Devarim, Words, because it provides the ultimate test for how one goes about determining if someone is speaking for God or against him. And this is something that so few people are aware of, that God actually gave us the means that we could deploy to determine if, for example, the Christian New Testament, the Talmud, the Quran, the Zohar is from Yahweh or an impostor. And what we find is that we don't have to guess as to whether or not the Christian New Testament is true, because God gave us the answer. The answer is it's not. And the same thing is true with the Talmud, with the Zohar, with the Quran. The same test can be used for all of them, and in all cases it proves that they are not. And as I shared yesterday, there are some surprises when you apply this test that people normally wouldn't expect. But there are books like the book of Enoch, Ezekiel, that are not true. The book of Esther would also fall into the category of false. Job, Jonah, equally untrue. They all fail the test that Yahweh has prescribed. So it's amazing that these books were maintained as part of the Jewish religion, and that they've been incorporated into Christian Bibles when they are so obviously false. So we're going to continue with our review of Devarim 18, one of my very favorite assessments that was provided by Moshe, because it empowers reasoned conclusions where you can determine whether or not something is true or false based entirely on the Word of God. So this continues. It says, you can actually become completely and continually perfected by being consistently right. Tamim Haya. You will genuinely exist as totally acceptable when you are truthful and correct, demonstrating integrity and sincerity, becoming, entirely undefiled, upright, and innocent by being honest, described in the call imperfect, with ongoing and genuine implications. With, guess who? Yahweh. Yahweh is the one and only name of the one and only God. And this says, Yahweh, your God. Well, so much for union hours, huh? Look, Yahweh, your God. It does not say Hashem. It does not say G-D. It does not say the Lord, which would be Satan's title according to God. It does not say Jesus. It does not say Allah. It says Yahweh. And we have this testimony right from the Dead Sea Scrolls going back 2,300 years. It says Yahweh. Who in the hell do the religious think they are to erase God's name from his own testimony and replace it with another? It is absolutely unexcusable, disgusting, unacceptable, unreasonable, revolting. It says right here that if you want to be perfected, if you want to be upright and exonerated before God, then you can achieve that through the Torah of Yahweh. It continues. This is, by the way, that was Devarim, Deuteronomy 18:13, a statement that, of course, completely repudiates and eviscerates Pauline Christianity that is based upon annulling the Torah and claiming that the Torah is a curse which cannot save. God just said the opposite. By comparison, these people from different races and places who you shall dispossess and remove. This is Asher, Atta, Yarash, who, for the benefit of the relationship, you will distance yourself from and disassociate with. He's speaking of the Goyim from the previous statement that we reviewed yesterday, whose religious ways, whose political ideologies Israel were told not to copy, not to emulate, not to associate with, not to bring into their community in any way. He says that those who you shall dispossess and remove, they listen to false prophets who obscure the truth with myths. Well, let me give you a few names of the false prophets. How about Paul? How about Luke? How about Peter? How about Mark? How about whoever the fraud is that wrote Matthew? The fraud who is now credited with John, the book of Revelation. How about the Quran and Muhammad? It says that the Gentiles have associated with, and they believe, false prophets who obscure the truth with myths. And boy, are there myths in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. What's interesting is many of the myths in Islam are actually the same myths that are in Judaism, because the rabbis sold Talmud readings to Muhammad to make his God appear religious. This is Anan, spellbinders. They're spiritualists and politicians blowing smoke who venerate saints and ancestors, often concealing their actual motives while clouding the issue and acting covertly. And they believe in antiquated religious notions and invalid opinion makers, wa kasam, and respond to cultural and conspiratorial suggestions, forming invalid conclusions based upon ancestry. Boy, it's obvious that one of two things happened here. Moshe was exposed to Gentile political and religious mantras, which of course he was when he was in Pharaoh's household. Yahweh brought him forward in time so that he could witness what would happen and how the religions of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism would permeate this part of the world that God is concerned about, and how they would be contrived and spread. Or Yahweh is doing what he said he would do, which is using Moshe's mouth, and he is literally speaking through Moshe's mouth, because Yahweh knew all of this to be true. So by comparison to the religious ways, the abhorrent religious ways of the Goyim, these people from different races and places, the Goyim, that you shall dispossess and remove, they listen to false prophets who obscure the truth with myths, spellbinders, spiritualists, politicians blowing smoke. And they believe in antiquated religious notions and invalid opinion makers. But as for you, this is not the correct way that Yahweh, your God, has offered to you for you to approach. Debatim, Deuteronomy 18:14, don't be religious. If there is something that's calling itself a religion, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, run, distance yourself from it. That's the thing that God is telling his people to avoid. This is not the way for you that Yahweh has offered for you to approach. The gift of Yahweh does not include anything that could be defined as religious. And Make no mistake, that is what he is addressing here. You don't have false prophets operating as political pundits. False prophets are associated with religion. The religions of the Gentiles, God is telling us, are based upon false prophets, and we ought not ever associate with any of them. And the ones that he would specifically be opposed are the ones that were actually conceived by and are the most harmful to his people: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. All three conceived by rabbis and devastating to God's people. Every false prophet, and especially Paul and Muhammad, well, also Akiba and Maimonides, obscure the truth with myths. They are spellbinders who blow smoke while concealing their motives and clouding the issues which actually matter. And without exception, these charlatans always base their antiquated religious opinions on misrepresentations of the words that Yahweh has conveyed. Of this, Paul and Akiba were maestros. But no one did it better than Paul because, well, Paul was a rabbi, trained by the rabbis, and if it was only based upon that education and that attitude that he could create the myths found now in the Christian New Testament. The very myth of Jesus Christ is based upon Paul's religious training as a rabbi. God's saying, don't believe them. Don't be lured in or follow them. They are not presenting the correct way to approach God. But Dowd is, which is why after telling his people who they should disregard, Yahweh reveals who they should trust. Now, it's one of the reasons I see Debatim 18 is so essential to this mission that Yahweh has asked us to collaborate on. And it's why my wife just yesterday and again today came in and said, the next thing you're going to do is to retranslate all of Debatim 18, and you're going to include it in your new book, Coming Home Volume 4, because it is specific to what Yahweh has asked you to accomplish on behalf of Israel, and the fact that you have become the foremost expert at delegitimizing Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, having written 13 books specifically to denounce the false prophets of those religions, while at the same time focusing on the relevance of Dowd and how these religions all slandered and robbed Dowd of all that he had contributed when he is the central figure in God's story. No one else has ever done any of those things, much less all of those things. And so we will do as Yahweh asked of Abraham, listen to your wife. Turns out to be pretty wise most of the time. So this continues. A prophet, a nabi, a person who is inspired by Yahweh and who communicates and records the testimony of God and who is accurate regarding past and present events from among your midst. Men, kerabata, out of your innermost nature, from your brethren. This is Moshe speaking to them now, or Yahweh speaking through them, through Moshe, from your brethren, similar to me. Yahweh, your God, will raise up and position to take a stand and be established, to affirm you. Kum, la'ata, he will validate and confirm this individual, elevating the status of this person to encourage and restore you, enabling you to approach and rise through this person. Hiphil, imperfect. He's going to work through this individual as if he were his understudy, as if he reflected his very nature, which is going to have unfolding implications throughout time. To him, I want you to actually and continually listen. Elhu Shama. It is my will that you genuinely and literally hear him with ongoing implications over time. Call, imperfect, paragogic, none. Call, literally, genuinely, actually, imperfect, on an ongoing basis, without remission. Paragogic, with tremendous passion and emphasis. Listen. Debadim words, Deuteronomy 18:15. We're going to continue with this, but there's just so much that is exciting here that I want to bring to your attention. All right. First of all, this person is called a Nabi, a prophet. That means this person cannot be Akiba, cannot be Maimonides. They didn't get any prophecies right. Cannot be Paul, cannot be Luke, cannot be Peter, cannot be Mark, cannot be pseudo Matthew or pseudo John, cannot be in Revelation, cannot be in any of those books, cannot be Muhammad. Why? Because this person is defined as a prophet using Yahweh's standard. Muhammad never got a single prophecy correct. Not one. Paul got the only one that Paul attempted, he got wrong. There are no prophecies that are uttered by Luke or by Mark or by Peter. None. And the prophecies that you find in Revelation are all plagiarized and twisted and paraphrased from actual prophets and from non-prophets. I mean, the number one source cited for Revelation is Ezekiel, and Ezekiel's invalid. That would make it a false book of false prophecy. Well, a true book of false prophecy or a false book of true prophecy. I guess you can't have the double negative, right?
That's not right.
Okay, well, it's a false book containing false prophecy. So it's a prophet. So this limits the list of people down to about 20 because it says, I want you to listen to him. Now, that means it has to be one of the people who spoke that Yahweh inspired, that is recorded for us to read, or that recorded what Yahweh said through them, so that we have a written text today that we can validate that this person was indeed a prophet, because that would be the only way to listen to them. So that cuts it down to about 20 people. And all time, that's 20 people. It's a pretty short list of people. Let me name drop here so you'll have a few. If he wasn't talking about someone else, you could include Moshe, but you can't include Moshe because he's talking about somebody else. So you could include Eliah, even though Eliah didn't write and Eliah didn't actually issue a prophecy. He's referred to as a prophet because his dress rehearsal for the sacrifice of the Adamah Parah, the red heifer, was conducted when he excoriated the religious and the political elite of Israel. So he could be a person, because we have a marvelous recounting of what he said, and boy, is he someone worth listening to. He's funny. So that's a possibility. Possibility would be Shamuel. Shamuel was a judge, but as a judge he became a prophet, and he's issued some of the most amazing prophecies ever as he was conveying what Yahweh said about Dod in particular. So it could be Shamuel, and we have 2 volumes that we can turn to. His testimony is so extensive, it's actually broken into 2 books. So Shamuel. Dod. Could be Dod. Dod is David. He is the most prolific prophet. He's the prophet of Yahowah who actually wrote the most. And unfortunately, nobody wants to consider Dowd a prophet. And yet all of his Mizmor and all of his Mashal, which collectively there are over 100 of them that are ascribed to him, are this vast reservoir of knowledge. In fact, they are the number one manuscripts, scrolls and fragments that were found above the Essene community in the caves of Qumran. The Dead Sea Scrolls have more of Dowd's Psalms than anything else. But Dowd wrote the Psalms, he wrote the Mizmor, and he is cited throughout the writings. So Dowd would be, well, not only a candidate, he'd be the foremost candidate because he is the most prolific prophet. He is also the one whom God listens to. He is the central figure in God's story. And he wrote songs for us to sing, which you would naturally want to listen to. So you couldn't have it, couldn't be any better than Dowd David. Then you could have other prophets, and I'm going to give you some names, but I'm going to disqualify all of them for you for a reason that will become obvious in a second. My personal favorite, because he wrote the textbook on how to be a choder, how to serve as the nakar, and how one should respond, would be Yeshaya Isaiah. They just don't come any more regal than Yeshaya. Brilliant mind, great vocabulary, sweeping expose on the life of Yisrael and the person who really says more about what we're doing together than anyone else. So Yeshaya, Yirmiyah, which lived within a century of Yeshaya. Hosea, who was the passionate prophet because Yahweh asked him to marry a temple prostitute so that he would have the empathy to understand why God was so disgusted by the adulterous whore that had become Israel and Israel's desire to be religious as opposed to engage in the relationship. So Hosea is another. You could have Yoel, who is becoming a favorite of mine based upon all he had to say so eloquently of what Israel is about to endure and how we're going to engage to make the best of a bad situation. You have Zechariah, who was just so effective at telling us everything we need to know about this, about the two witnesses, about how even Dowd, when he returns, is going to be serving as the high priest to anoint the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, telling us how God's going to go about bringing all of his people back to Jerusalem for the sacrifice of the red heifer, how he's going to do away with the whore of Babylon, and then how when he comes back with his beloved son Dowd, that the world's going to, that survived, this remnant of Israel is going to cry over this, knowing that he's the one they pierced. It's just it's a marvelous book. And then you end up with Malachi, and with Malachi, he's the last of the prophets, and he puts so much of the end times events, future history really, into context for us. But it can't be any of those. Why? Because Moshe said, like me. We hinted at this the other day, and I've spent more time actually talking to Leah and Rich, my wife and our producer, technologist here, about this than I have elsewhere, which is that in Yahweh's story, there are players, and there are prophets, and there are actually a number of prophet players. Now, I don't use player as a pejorative. They're the cast in Yahweh's story. A lot of people play roles in Yahweh's enduring story. You know, Adam and Chawah played their part. Cain and Abel played their part. Noah and his sons and their wives played their part. We certainly see the role, an amazing role that Abraham and Sarah played. Even Lot, for all of his foolishness, played a part. And so we're going to go through the period, and we see that Ishmael played a part, and that a bad one, but he did. Even Hagar played a part. And then we go on through Yishak. Esau played a part, even though he was not the one who was chosen, at least not at the beginning. And then we get Jacob, and then Jacob has 12 sons, and they become Yisrael, and they all played their parts. So lots of people playing a part. In the end, God has more prophecies about his Choder and his Nakar that play a role in reintroducing God's wayward and antagonistic children, Yisrael and Yehudim, to his name and to his son and to his covenant and to his invitations based on the restoring witness, the Moed Mikre. So there's a number of players in God's story. And I've just shared with you, there's a number of prophets in God's story. To be this particular person, you have to be at the intersection of those two. Have the common denominator of both of them. So who were the player prophets? Moshe, but this is not about him. Dod, who's the ultimate player prophet. Now, Shamuel was a character in God's story and also a prophet. So he remains a possibility, but not likely, because Shamuel's role is to introduce us to Dod. So it wouldn't be him, would it? It would be Dod, not Shamuel. Boy, none of the rest of the prophets were players in the story. They simply said, "Thus says Yahweh." And I would stop the list there, and we'd have just Moshe and Dod, with Dod being the only one that would qualify, except there is a reference earlier in Bamidbar in Numbers 11, where Eldod, God's beloved, who is Dod, and my Dod, who is the Goyim who serves as the right hand of Dod, my Dod, to cleanse and to provide new life for the remnant of Yisrael. And he says both of the two of them are prophets. So you would have a significant player in God's story is Yada, the Nakar, and the Choder, who is considered a prophet, but since that's me, and I'm unaware of any prophecy that I have made on the basis of "Thus says Yahweh," I'm going to disqualify myself from that list. Because while he's referring to me as a prophet, it has to be in a different sense, because I have never said, "Thus says Yahweh," speaking for myself. I've said, "Thus says Yahweh" a lot, because guess what? Yashayah and the other prophets say, "Thus says Yahweh" frequently, and if I'm reading and sharing what they said, I will read and share what they said, but I'm attributing it to them. So I'm going to have to disqualify myself, because I am unaware of a "Thus says Yahweh." I've made a lot of predictions about what's going to happen in the future. I've always cast those as predictions. Now, the fact of the matter is, thus far, I have never been wrong about those things. So they would fit the test, but I've not stated them as prophecies. I have stated them as logical deductions and rational conclusions based upon the prophecies that Yahweh has conveyed, and an analysis of current events and how they are being, how they could be properly ascribed to those prophecies, and what the natural conclusion is based upon the combination of those things. So they're reasoned conclusions based upon prior prophecy. So that leaves us with one. There's only one prophet like Moshe who was a player, a central player. I mean, a magnificent player. There's three Zeroah. it's uncomfortable for me to admit this because I don't fit into that group. I'm the short stick, if you will, in that group. But according to Yahweh, according to his prophets, the three Zeroah, which is really the most important title that Yahweh ascribes to anyone, are Moshe, Dod, and Yada. And so of the two that are the most important, Moshe and Dod, we're right back to there's only one person in all of human history that this can apply to, Dod David. And he's the person that's already been mentioned. So he's a prophet from among your midst. Well, that would have disqualified me, and so I didn't even have to disqualify myself, but it would disqualify me because I am not from their midst. I am the man from Edom. Now, that's tangentially from their midst because, well, Esau was Jacob's brother after all. But the fact is that I am not from your midst. I could not be the person that Yahweh speaks so vociferously about that is going to reunite Yahweh and Yisrael, Dod and Yehudim, without being a goyim. It's goy. It's because one of the most prolific of these terms is nakar, which means observant foreigner. And I'm routinely referred to as a goy. So I am not of the of your brethren, from your midst, from your brethren, but guess who is? Dod. So, and by the way, Muslims want to claim that this is the one place where, since the Quran says that Muhammad was mentioned in the Torah, and they can't find any place, so they always go to this place because they claim that Muhammad was a prophet, but Muhammad wasn't a prophet, and they claim that Muhammad wasn't, that he was Arab, even though he actually was Jewish, but we do not know. We can't prove that. It's just a 99% likelihood from the evidence. But Muhammad would not fit this because he is not considered of their brethren, and he was not a prophet. It's just Dod. He's the only person who fits this. And he happens to be the most important person in God's story. And the only way that you can find salvation with Yahweh is through Dod. And he is our returning king. So, a prophet from among your midst, from your brethren, similar to me, a player prophet, one of the Zeroah, Yahweh. And that's essential because he can't be anybody. It can't be Jesus, for example, because there's no mention of Yahweh, and Jesus never existed. So myths would be discounted. Myths are not brethren. Myths are myths. They're not brethren. The Christian New Testament repudiates the Torah, so it can't be Jesus because he was, according to Paul, who created him, he came to annul the Torah, so it can't be Jesus from either of those situations. Jesus never existed, and there is no Yahweh in the New Testament, so he didn't come from Yahweh, so Jesus is disqualified. So Yahweh, your God. That would also mean it can't be Akiba, it can't be Maimonides. They weren't prophets, and they completely wrote Yahweh's name out of their story. Will rise up and position to take a stand which establishes and affirms you. So, go through the whole list. Did anybody in Yahweh's story, from beginning to end, anyone other than Dod fill that role? Did Yahweh specifically raise up and position to take a stand someone other than Dod who establishes and affirms you? Dod did it twice already. He's going to do it a third time. And he's the only one that's even done it once. Moshe gave up on him, but it can't be Moshe anyway. He didn't even make it into the promised land, so it's for darn sure it's not Moshe. Can't be their first king, Shaul, because, well, he got his head cut off after he became demon-possessed because Yahweh said, I have nothing to do with you. You're a disgrace. And you look at the kings after that time, with the exception of Dod, they were all horrific. So what did Dod do? He established Yisrael. He unified Yisrael. He was the one who protected Yisrael. First, from the dastardly Philistines. He whooped them big time. So he established Yisrael. He even brought Yisrael to Jerusalem. He's the one who acquired the Temple Mount. He's the one who created the city of Dod, which is Jerusalem. It was the unified kingdom under Dod. So he did. Yeah, and Yahweh said, he's my chosen one. Yahweh said, I have anointed him as your Messiah. Yahweh says, he's even my son, my firstborn. And then, of course, who is the one that really establishes and affirms you, validates you, elevating your status, who restores you, who enables you to approach Yahweh? There's only one person in all of human history that has done that. There will be two. There's only one now. Dod. How? Because Dod fulfilled Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim. In his second of 3 lives, Dod opened the door to life on Pesach, allowing his corporeal body, his Bashar, to be beaten by the Romans and then crucified, something he himself writes of in first person 1,000 years before he endured it. He even told us the exact date that this would happen, 700 years in advance. It's Dod. He's the one who was crucified, fulfilling Passover in 33 CE, year 4,000 Yah. He is the very one who opened the door to life. And then on Matzah, he explains in first person how he would take our guilt and carry it into Sheol to deposit it there so it would never be seen again, so that we would be affirmed, so that we'd be validated, so that we would be elevated, so that we'd be restored, so we could approach Yahweh. He's the one who did that. And then he's the one who fulfilled Bakurim as the Bakor, the firstborn son, fulfilling firstborn children, so that we could all be established within Yahweh's family, so that we too could stand with God. Dod is the only person in human history that has done these things. He fulfilled the first 3 in Moed Mikre in 33 CE, year 4,000 Yah. There will be someone else, that third Zeroah. He will also forego his Bashar body, allowing a beast to bludgeon it, as the red heifer, as the Adamah Parah on Towrah, 2 Moed fulfillments from now, so as to restore the adulterous woman that is Yisrael in this final mortal remnant of God's people, so that they can witness and be part of the great homecoming that will happen when Dod returns. And he will return on Kippurim in year 6,000 Yah, which is 2033, returning actually on sunset October 2nd of that year. And I said that Dod would establish Yisrael 3 times. Well, he's coming back as the king of Yisrael, the king of the universe. His throne is forevermore. It's established by Yahweh. Yahweh says he's coming back as brilliant as the sun, and that he is Elyon, Almighty God, in your presence. I would say that would be a pretty good third establishment. It's Dod. And so my wife is right. This statement speaks of our mission, because it is my job. I'm the first person in human history to make this discovery, to prove it, to share it with you, and to convey it even through prophecies like this one, so that you would understand it. That makes this exceedingly important. I mean, you have on YouTube, for example, about 1 billion channels you can listen to. You have on X about 1 billion accounts that you can follow. You have on Facebook another 1 billion pages that you can examine and explore. But there's only one of all of those who can introduce you to Yahowah, who can teach you about his beloved son, Dod, and all that he did to fulfill this particular prophecy and so many more, so that you can become immortal, perfect, adopted into his family, enriched and empowered by God. Only one. Now, you would think in a rational world that that would be the most important page, channel, and account on this planet. And then this says, to him, you should actually and continually listen. And you can. But never have his words resonated more clearly and powerfully than they do through Yada Yahowah, which is the place, particularly in the Coming Home series, where we explore every nuance that came from this man and explain why it was or how it was that he came to realize that he should volunteer to be the Passover lamb. And then why, once he came to recognize by studying what Abraham and Yishak did on Mount Moriah, 400, from his 1,000 years before he would come to make this decision. So 1,000 years earlier, he read what Abraham and Yishak did on Mount Moriah, and he realized that that whole narrative of do not take the life of your only son, your beloved son, because Yahweh says, I will provide the lamb. And then he recounted the conversation that Yahweh had with him through Nathan, where he said, you are my beloved son. Dod is my son. I am his father. I'm going to establish his seat of honor forever. And I'm going to build him a house. And he said, oh, now I know. He's going to build a house and a family through me. And I am the son who is going to be offered as that lamb. He came to understand it. I've shared with you how that was possible. I came to the same conclusion, studying this material independently. So he's brighter than me. He certainly did. And then I came to understand why Dod said, I want to do this. Yeah, I know that being crucified doesn't sound like much fun to fulfill Passover. And I recognize that going into hell and taking everyone's guilt with me into hell, that is not going to be a good time. But for crying out loud, it's 2 days. 2 days for all eternity. I can save everyone on earth that capitalizes on what I do on those 2 days, and that 100% of those who enter forevermore will be there because of what I have done for them. Meaning, for the first time ever, in the case of Yehudim, they're going to be respectful, because no one will be there that hasn't benefited from Dod. If you do not love and respect what Dod has done, you're not there. And if you're there because you do respect and love and cherish what Dod has done for you. And so Dod said, sure, it's 2 days for eternity. It makes the impossible job that Moshe said cannot be done, which is to lead and govern and teach God's people. It makes it possible. He said, sure, I'll do it. So now we know how he figured out he should do it, and we figured out why he decided that he should do it. And then he goes on to explain to us why Yahweh agreed. He went to Yahweh and said, we're going to do this. It's a team project, but you're going to bring me back in year 4,000 Yah. He even told us the exact date Dod did. And we're going to do this together. It's the right thing to do. And Yahweh said, that's my guy. That's why I chose him. It is the right thing to do. Remember I told you that I made a decision on Dod based on a criterion that you humans wouldn't know and understand for a very long time as to why he was the right guy, why I chose him, why I called him my son, why I anointed him the Messiah, why I chose him to be king, why he became the shepherd of my people, why I called him the Zeroah, the sacrificial lamb as well, why I made him a prophet so that he would provide the eyewitness testimony of what he himself would do for us. And so, with all of that, obvious, even though no one had figured it out in 3,000 years, even my favorite prophet, Yeshua, he figured out, he said that the guilt of us all would be laid on him as the Lamb of God, because we have all gone astray. And so Yeshua figured it out, and Yeshua even figured it out by introducing it and saying, I want you to listen to the fella that comes to understand who the Zeroah are. When somebody tells you that they understand who the Zeroah are, then they will be in a position to explain exactly what follows related to the fulfillment of Passover. Guess who the first person to ever explain that there were Zeroah, much less identify the three of them? That same fellow. Yada. Me. And so I'm telling you, because God told you, because Moshe told you, you need to listen to what Dod has to say. He told you all of these things. He told you that he was going to be the Passover lamb. He told you he was going to fulfill matzah. He told you he was going to fulfill Bikurim. He told you what those things were going to mean to you. And he even told you that you would screw it up, that you would deny him, that you would reject him, and that you would foist crude counterfeits in his place. Rob him of his titles, of his accolades and achievements, and afford them. Christianity is to an outright myth, a complete, utter fabrication, a person who never, ever existed in Jesus Christ. And then with Judaism, it's Bar Kokhba, who is the warlord that Akiba, as the founder of Judaism, foisted on his people, that led to the diaspora, that led to the Holocaust, that led to God's people never understanding that Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim were fulfilled by Dod, and that he is the Son of God, and that he is the Messiah. What a shame. And you tell it to people today, and it just go boing, like bonking your head against a stone wall. It's the single most important, most beneficial, most valuable, most relevant discovery in human history. And the advice is to listen to him so that you might come to know it too. And it's right there in the Torah. It is my will that you genuinely and literally hear him, with ongoing implications over time. Now you say, well, how could Moshe talk about this? He didn't know Dod. Dod wouldn't be born for another 400 years. Oh, yes, he did. He met exactly with him. You don't know the story of the Torah very well. I have even told this one to you. When Moshe gave up and said to God, you might as well kill me, because no one, not any sole individual, can lead these people, can even endure them, can even comprehend how belligerent they can be. I can't restore your relationship with them or my relationship with them. It's impossible. What did Yahweh do? He showed him exactly how it would be possible. He said to Moshe, there are harvests to come. Do not question whether or not I will be effective and fruitful through those harvests. Bikurim, he fulfilled through Dod. Shabuah and Towrah, he will fulfill through me. Do not even question whether or not I will be successful. And then he gives his Spirit in overabundance to Eldod and to my Dod. And then they speak as prophets, and they reside within the very tabernacle of Yahowah. He told him exactly who Dod was. Eldod, the Almighty's beloved. He even told him the role that I would play in serving as his right hand to cleanse his people and provide them with life in anticipation of his return. And Moshe's response was the first positive response that he had during this whole episode. He says, oh my God, let's celebrate this. This is wonderful, because this was the answer. So he knew all about him. He even knew his name, and he knew that he would be the beloved of the Almighty. It's amazing how much you learn. You know, it's Rich is constantly saying, you know, because he's moved here. He worked for Ice, pretty good iced tea and coffee, and Leia's cooking. Leia's cooking is is pretty awesome, and to be here, which is the most exciting place on earth, and he's constantly saying, you know, every day is this voyage of discovery where we have so much confirmation and affirmation that we're doing exactly as God had intended, and it's just like living in the middle of the prophecy, where the prophecy is just all around us, and everywhere we turn, everywhere we look, there is another instruction and affirmation of it. And so, my friends, that's where we are. Well, Moshe wasn't done. And remember, Moshe gave up. He said, I can't do this. And Yahweh had told Moshe, don't fret it, man. I will use your mouth. I will speak through your mouth. This is actually Yahweh speaking through Moshe. My guess is that Yahweh knew what he was talking about. This is a really well-written prophecy. This is extraordinarily precise, with every nuance of this being profoundly important, and not a single word of this, not a single word has been understood until I took the time to explain it. That's how we work together. That's why this relationship is so important. You've never heard any rabbi say this. You've never heard anybody who would call themselves a Christian say this. They would ascribe it to the myth. A Muslim would ascribe it to Muhammad, for crying out loud. I mean, totally and completely ignorant. And a rabbi, they hate Dod. They are so envious of Dod they could puke. That's why they go and say God can't have a son, even though Yahweh says 3 times he is my son. That's why the rabbis are all looking for this unnamed Messiah, because they don't like Dod, even though Yahweh said 3 times, he's my Messiah. That's why they're looking for a new leader, a king, when Yahweh says, no, his throne's everlasting. I'm bringing him back. He's my guy. They're looking for a chosen one. They even think Trump is their chosen one. No, their chosen one is Dod. All right, it goes on. I get excited about this because this is the essence of my relationship with Yahweh. It's why I was called to do this. This is the core of my responsibility. I serve as Dod's choter and as Dod's Bashar herald. This is consistent with everything. This is consistent with everything which you requested of Yahweh. I tell you, this is hard. This is the hardest thing of all for me to endure, is what I'm going to have to communicate to you now. It pains me, Israel, that you could be this obnoxious, this revolting, this utterly disgusting, and you haven't figured it out, and you're still this way. This is consistent with everything which you requested of Yahowah, your God and Choreb, during the day of the assembly, when you said, never again let me hear the voice of Yahowah. I'm going to end this program right there. I want you to ruminate in that. I want you to think about that, and we'll return to this very statement at our next show. But now you think about it. How horrible that was to say, and the very fact that you have not recovered since. I thank you for listening.